If you're planning to raise a family in Toronto or even thinking about schools for next year, this might be the most important video you need to watch. We're breaking down some of the top family-focused neighborhoods in Toronto, and I'll show you exactly how to research the school zones properly, how to use the maps, verify boundaries, and making sure you're looking in all the right places for your family's needs. Then we'll look at what homes actually cost in those communities and the strategies that families are using going into 2026 to be sure to secure those properties early and ready for the next school year. Whether you're looking to buy into one of those school zones or if you need to sell in order to make a move into one of those areas, I'll walk you through of how to think about timing and planning so you're set up before the school rush hits. Let's jump into the map, and this is where we're going to start because this is a really good place. The first thing we are going to start with is the City of Toronto map, and you can actually go to Google and type in TRREB map, and what that's going to give you is the map that we use as realtors, so you can see exactly how the city is structured and what are some of the divisive lines across the city when it comes to areas. Now, when you get to this map, one thing that you will see, and I'll just bring this down a little bit, is the TRREB community map layers. So obviously we have the City of Toronto. If we click on this button here, municipalities, it's going to divide up the city with W's, C's, and E's. C's for central, W for west, and E for the east. On the west side, the W's are basically divided here by give or take Lansdowne. There's the train tracks that go across here. So Lansdowne, Dufferin, that's kind of that divisive line here for the W's. This line going across here is Eglinton. This line going across here is Bloor. And as we get into central, we're basically from Dufferin, Lansdowne all the way over to give or take the DVP, and then things go east from there. Of course, with Bloor going all the way across, you're going to have different pockets here throughout the city. And if you've watched any of my videos before, we've talked about all the different areas, W1, W2, CO1, CO8, EO1, EO2. So you have a bit of an idea of some of the areas we've been talking about, and we'll break those down today. Now, if you do take a look at communities, it will be very tough to see as we're so zoomed out. So this is where zooming into the map, you'll clearly see how these zones are divided. So if you're looking for an area, for example, like Roncy, you'll see that Roncesvalles is here, and it goes basically from the actual street Roncy over to pretty much the train tracks. And as you get over the train tracks, now you're into an area called Little Portugal. So that's just an example of how everything's divided up and how each micro market, so we call these micro markets, performs very differently, especially when it comes to school zones. The next thing we're going to look at is the Fraser Institute. And I don't know if there's any better rankings out there, but this is certainly one that does have ratings for each school. And as we take a look and zoom in, so we were just, for example, on Roncy, you could zoom in here and you'll see that there's a couple schools here. If you click on this number 2, you have Fern Avenue Public School. The ranking for this school is 6.8. And St. Vincent de Paul Catholic School, the ranking's 8.6. And if you go just to the west of Roncy Avenue, you're looking at a 7.5 for Garden. And a little bit north to Howard Park, you have Howard Public School. That's a rating of 8. So just want to give you an example of how we're looking at some of the ratings for the schools. And you can also go to hoodq.com/Michael Ouzas Real Estate, and you'll get onto this HoodQ platform, and you can just click right here on schools, click on Toronto, and you can just keep narrowing this down as you go forward. It does give you a range of property types, but if you look and zoom in here, so Niagara is an area in Toronto, it'll give you the location area, and as you click on the guide, it'll actually break down where that pocket exactly is and some of this different schools and household details of the area. So if you scroll down here, the schools in Niagara, this is all the different schools, and then it says some of the different ratings. You can click on a school and it'll give you more and more details there. So that's just an idea of what exactly you can figure out on this HoodQ standpoint. So that's the 3 setups that we're just going to use to find those schools. First, we start with the TRREB map, then we switch over to the school rankings, and we also take another deeper dive into the HoodQ report. Now, this is where things get interesting, and I'm just going to use this example because I already have it pulled open, is you're going to really want to make sure that we know the exact boundaries of these schools. And one of the things that you won't find on this rating, for example, is where the boundaries are for each school. So it's really, really important to note that if you are, for example, looking to go to Fern Avenue Public School, what exactly the catchment is and where exactly the street starts. So for this school, for example, you're going up to basically Jeffrey, and you're going east to MacDonnell, and then you're going south to basically Harvard Avenue and over to Roncy. And the reason I know that is I do work in that area pretty often. So it's an example of knowing exactly what that catchment is. And the fourth thing we need to figure out is you have to go to the Toronto District School Board. And if you are looking for a Catholic school, you have to go to the Toronto Catholic District School Board and really narrow down that catchment. And that's where you can just do a quick search. I'm just using this example on the public school board. Type in Fern, type search school. Here's the Fern Avenue Junior and Senior Public School. And then you click on here, map boundaries, and it's going to give you that exact catchment there. So basically down to Marion, over to Macdonell, up to Jeffrey, and over to Roncy. So that's kind of where you can see pretty much where that pocket is to a T and know whether or not you're within that catchment. So that's your piece on how to find the school catchments. Now, the next piece of that is, do catchments really make a difference when it comes to price? And they certainly do. So I've pulled out a few different areas. And when it comes to pricing, this is something that it is a case by case basis. Of course, there's different factors on property level. Does it need work, not need work? What school catchment does it fall into? But just an example of how we're looking at price across the board. So here's an example of W1. And as we mentioned, that's where that falls into place. If you are looking for a detached property in W1 for 2025, and these are the data here up to basically the end of September, most properties that are detached sell over 2 million, but there are some properties that sell between 1 million and 2 million. So knowing what exactly these properties look like and feel like and where they're located makes a big difference. Now, W1 is quite big. It actually goes east and west of Hyde Park. If we take a look at what exactly is happening in that area, all of W1 is still selling pretty well here in 2025. In September, there was 33 active detached listings, 12 of them sold. So basically 1 in 3 are selling, which still keeps us very much in a seller's market. One thing to note that if you were looking in the month of August, only 3 out of the 17 sold. So it was very much kind of in a buyer's market. But I will say in these areas and some of these best areas across the city, most of the best properties don't come to market until the seasonality changes. So for example, if there's a detached property ready to be sold in maybe July and August, most sellers will typically wait until the official fall market to launch that property because they know that's when they'll usually get better traction. The same thing goes when you're shopping for schools. So one of the things, if you do have children, you may want to be looking to make a move to be ready for next year's school year. And that makes total sense. So the logical idea of when to start looking would be January, February to lock something in before the summertime, get all settled and get everything ready for the next school year. Just a heads up, that is what most families are going to be doing. And that's generally when the competition will be at its highest. This is just an example of how in these areas, we don't see a ton of activity in the off months. For example, as we go November, December, even into January. But from a strategy standpoint, which we'll discuss in a second, I do have some ideas when it comes to that to really set you up for success. If we're taking a look at the average benchmark price, so in Roncy, for example, the benchmark price a little bit less than High Park, Swansea as a whole. And that just could also be from a size standpoint or what's sold. What I do know very confidently is that the High Park properties are quite large. So you're looking at pretty sizable detached properties, and you'll get typically a little bit smaller in the Roncy specific pocket. Price properties a little bit tighter together. This benchmark price will most likely go up in October, as we've seen some pretty good sales here in the last couple of weeks. Just depends what the lower part of the market has been selling for. Now, if we're looking at a semi-detached in that same area in W1, as you can see, most of them have fallen between basically 1 million and 2 million, with only 7 selling above the 2 million. And I can surely tell you that the ones that are selling below 1 million in these areas are probably pretty much full gut jobs. So if you are looking for a full gut renovation project, you'll be on the lower end of the spectrum. If you want something that's very turnkey where you're moving into and you don't have to do anything, you'll be at the higher end of the spectrum for sure. And it does make a difference here, especially over the 2 million. Generally is like a 4 or possibly a 5th bedroom, even for a semi. So maybe a 4 plus a small office type of thing. And all the bells and whistles, finished basement, maybe underpin basement. Those are good examples. 4 out of 10 condos sold in September, still very much a seller's market. And as we can see here, 1.55, that was up from August. Now, if we're looking at the benchmark prices, this is lower, but I know working in these areas, they're definitely higher than these benchmark. Some of the lower sales in the area will bring down the benchmark price. Here's a look at the schools there. They're all rated basically around 8, Fern just under 7. Those are the public schools. Now, if we're looking at W2, this is where you get into more of the Bloor West Village. Similar story to Roncy. You're most likely going to be be in for a detached in the mid to high 1 millions and most likely into the 2 millions. 20 sold out of 60. Now W2, just to note, does make big changes here going north south of Annette, going east west of Dundas, or even Parkside. There's some different pockets in this area which will be on the probably lower end of pricing for those pockets. But if this is Junction and this is basically North Bloor West Village, but if you want to be in the High Park and Bloor West pocket, you'd definitely be on the higher end of this range for detached. And that's where if we look at semis, similar story, the higher end of the semis, same thing. And there's some great schools. Semis, if you look here just for reference before we get to the schools, 1.68 months of inventory. It's a hot area if you are looking to purchase in that area. You will be most likely be in competition if you're looking W2 for a semi, and that's where we're seeing the benchmark prices and the schools. Bloor West Village proper schools, both rated over 9. They're very highly rated schools. Annette Public School rated 7.5, still quite good. Now, if we're looking on the east end, so if we take the book and we basically open it at Yonge Street, the east end is basically a very similar story. So EO1 would be very similar to W1. And again, these pockets do change. So Withrow Park, one of the best parks here in the city, and this North Riverdale performs extremely well in any market. These are the price points, very similar to W1. And again, still very much in a seller's market. Basically 31 listings, 11 of them sold, average price 1.7 for a detached. And when we see this, we generally don't have a ton of sales. 11 sales is not a ton, but if they're better renovated properties, it starts to bring the price up. And if semis, same kind of story, a little bit cheaper than in the west end. The east end, depending on the size, you usually get a smaller semi typically than you would in the west end. We see a lot of east end semis at various sizes, but as we're looking very much in a seller's market, it has been all year, and that I don't think will change, especially we get into the new year. Public schools, as mentioned, PAPE 8.6, Withrow 8.5, Franklin 7.7. Now this is just North Riverdale schools, and those are public side. I just pulled the public just because that was the easiest ones to pull when we were on the site, but you can do the same thing for Catholic. And if you want any of those details, just send me a message. I'll run those numbers for you, no problem. If you're looking at EO2, so you're in beaches territory, chances are you'll be spending over $2 million for a turnkey detached property, or definitely in the high ones. These lower price ones will certainly need a renovation, or the properties do change, especially when you get into catchments here for schools. So that's something in all these areas, especially in Toronto. The catchments make all the world of a difference when it comes to pricing, especially when looking at these charts. And as you can see here, semis, same story for EO2, and then the benchmark prices and the schools, Balmy rated 8.5, Williamson 7.3. Let's jump a little more central, and one of the best pockets of the city is CO4 and Yonge and Lawrence. This also has Forest Hill in there. This is one of the most popular areas of the city. The subway line's right here, the Health Sciences Center, lots of great schools, lots of private schools there too. This is where they all kind of resonate. If we're looking at the average pricing, you're looking at pretty much over 2 million across the board for a detached. These lower priced ones will most likely need a pretty good amount of work, but you're going to be over 2 million for detached, especially if you want the fourth bedroom. You may get something in the 2-bedroom range between 1.75 and 2 million. But if you are looking for the bigger house or the renovated house, most likely over 2 million. And basically 1 out of 4 has been selling. It's a little more balanced there, but if you look at the average price, you're looking around 3.1 million average price for that pocket. And there's a good example of Lawrence Park North, the single family detached at 2 million, Bedford Park North at 2.7. There are a lot of properties in Lawrence Park North also pushing that mid 2s as well. And if we're looking at semi-detached, you will most likely be in the high 1.5 to 2 million range for the most part. Not a ton of semis selling over 2 million. This area mostly has a lot of infill. So it used to be bungalows and then have been rebuilt. And that's where you get a lot of the newer renovated properties. And again, that average price 1.7 for a semi-detached in CO4. And if we're looking at the schools, 9.1, Wanless 8.3, Ledbury Park Public School 8.6, and Armor Heights 7.5. If you made it to this part of the video, we're going to break down strategy that you need to know if you are looking to get into one of these school catchments to prepare for the school year. Now, there's a couple ways to look at this. You could either be just buying into one of those properties. Maybe you're renting something now and looking to move to the area, or if you need to sell and then move to one of those areas, some of the strategies for both. So on the first thing I will mention on either side is getting out into the market early before you actually want to make your move will be super important. And the reason I mention that every single time is because in these areas, these are a lot of really old homes. You're talking 100-year-old homes. A lot of them have been renovated. However, getting to know the look and feel, the neighborhoods, the streets, having a lot of that process down and done early will save you a lot of time later, especially as the market starts ramping up when we get into the spring market. These areas perform the absolute best in the spring market because most buyers like yourselves, if you're watching this, are looking to make that move before next summer. If you can get any advantage over those buyers that are just getting their search started into the new year and getting out there in November, December, January, you'll be much further ahead because the second you see the property that checks all the boxes because you've done a lot of the due diligence first, you'll be much further ahead getting into that property. And then you can always negotiate a longer closing or be ready to go when that offer date comes. Because most of these properties do have offer dates, by the way. You'll be ready. You'll be much further ahead. And you'll also have an idea of what things are selling for as we trek along. The way I like to mention it is you're in the market versus just watching on the sidelines. And I'm telling you, the apps will not give you the full story when it comes to what a property actually looks and feels like, especially when you're purchasing for yourself and your family. The next piece is if you do have to sell something in order to move into one of these areas. And that's a big thing to consider, is that especially if you're looking to upsize from a condo into a home, is knowing what each micro market is performing like. So for example, if you're living in a condo downtown and you want to move either east or west or central to one of those areas we discussed today, the condo market is performing very differently than these housing markets. So knowing how that looks and having all the things ready for your condo, especially if you need to sell that condo before making your purchase, getting that process started much earlier than when you actually want to make that move will save you a lot of stress and headache in the future. So this is where having that strategy in play early will help you down the line, especially if your condo needs a little bit of work or if your condo is ready to go. Knowing how to get ahead of some of the other inventory that may be coming to market from a strategy perspective could give you an upper hand, and negotiating a long closing is one of the best negotiations or easiest negotiations we can add in. So having that ready, so at least then you have the time to go and purchase something along that timeline, will be really, really key to strategy. And by the way, I've actually created an upsizing calculator. If you're curious on what the numbers actually look like, you click on that link down below that says upsizing calculator and you'll get all these details. But if you had any questions on strategizing for your plan, click on that first link down below that says discovery call. We can discuss, and I'm here to help you navigate this entire process from A to Z. It's something I do very often with clients. I'd be happy to help you along the way. I'm Michael Ouzas. Thanks for watching.